again, as I have said earlier, the screen is yours.
Thank you, Jason. Good afternoon and welcome to the second panel of the Tresca Rethink Final Conference. To discuss the challenges and opportunities in doing effective science communication on social media, I have the pleasure to welcome Dr. Jing Zeng, Senior Research Associate at the University of Zurich, Lizzy Steib, Head of Research and Text at Kurzgesagt, and Maximilian von Perfall, Strategic Partnerships Manager at YouTube. If you wish to ask any questions, please feel free to use the Q&A function. We'll have 10 minutes at the end of the panel. Before we start, I would like to remind everyone the difference between misinformation and disinformation. Misinformation with an M is a false information spread without malignant intent. However, disinformation with a D is the deliberate and knowingly spread of disinformation. Moreover, I would like to add some numbers to give better context. As of January 2022, 4.95 billion people had access to the internet. 4.62 billion people were social media users. That's more than half of the total world population. There are currently 17 platforms with over 300 million active users. Facebook has almost 3 billion users, YouTube has almost 56 billion, and WhatsApp has 2 billion users. 100 years ago or so, maybe a few hundred of thousand people had access to scientific knowledge across the world through academia. Now, not only through school, but through the internet and especially social media, virtually everyone can share their understanding of science without necessarily acknowledging their own limitations. Jing, could you tell us a little bit about your research, your point of view, and the democratization of science and how it's linked to conspiracy theories?
Sure, thank you, Diane. So I am a social media researcher with a specific focus on misinformation, especially science-related conspiracy theories. And so I would like to use this opportunity to also provide a definition of conspiracy theories. As you have already heard from Diane, what misinformation, disinformation is, so what is conspiracy theory? So if we can think of a misinformation as a kind of more generic type of deceptive information, and it has different branches of types of misinformation. Disinformation is one of them, and another kind of cousin related is conspiracy theories. So according to one of those most established definitions, conspiracy theories are explanations of events, phenomena, or practices that make reference to the imagination of a so-called secret society or the powerful individuals. So as you can hear, one of the defining characteristics that makes it different apart from misinformation is this referencing to this kind of supposedly secret plots of this perceived evil and villain. So yeah, for example, COVID-19, when someone said that the vaccination may not be effective, that's not conspiracy theory. However, when people make claims like, okay, the whole health crisis is actually a hoax, a false flag event that has been staged, planned, or plotted by the big pharma. That's a conspiracy theory because it made a reference to the imagination of the so-called big pharma, the pharmaceutical industry.
Thank you, Jing. Lizzy, you're part of a very popular YouTube channel, which is called Kurzgesagt, or in a nutshell. You said a term a little bit earlier, which is edutainment. So education and entertainment. All of the videos are about science. Do you ever encounter conspiracy theories?
I think the opportunities where we most noticeably encounter conspiracy theories is when people try to rope us into them. We have actually, we had occasions where something, what was just described in that definition, literally happened. So we've done a couple of videos about the immune system, one of them talking about the antibody library and how our bodies have the ability to immunize ourselves against every disease in the world. And people took that out of context, spread it on forums on the internet and said, you see, we don't need vaccines. We are already equipped to do it ourselves, which is not what the video said. And that occasion, for example, we actually amended the video and added a sentence to make clear this is not our intention there. Or we had similar occasions when we did videos about nutrition, when we're talking about the way like people choose to set up their diet. This is always very personal, so people get excited and also angry. And when we, for example, talked about you should reduce your meat consumption, people were saying that we were paid off by big vegan, whatever that is supposed to be.
Never heard of big vegan, but I guess that's...
Us neither.
Maximilian, could you tell us a little bit about the current trends and conspiracy theories at YouTube, or what is hot in that world?
Of course. I think conspiracy theories have been around on YouTube as long as the platform existed, of course, but I think in the past probably 2 years we've seen, especially the pandemic, of course, really boost conspiracy theories on the platform. And Lizzy mentioned a great example of a video that was intended in a very different way, being pivoted in some very, very different way. And I think we have increasingly seen that on the platform. And we have community guidelines that sort of draw the line between what can be mentioned on the platform and what videos can sort of propel in their content. But in the past years, these community guidelines have really become more and more important because we've seen a lot more content in these gray areas that can't be really defined by the community guidelines. And one thing that is also to make this a little more tangible, the community guidelines, I think a very good example is something that is not harmful in real life. For example, a theory about flat Earth, for example, which is not, in most cases, not very harmful in real life, compared to something that does harm in real life, like, for example, the theory around 5G towers causing the coronavirus and people burning them down in the UK. And that really needs us to sort of tweak and change the community guidelines on the go. And I think this is what we've seen in the past years, that we have increasingly or have more often have the need to change the community guidelines according to fast-changing conspiracy theories on the platform.
Actually, how does science communication look like on social media? How often do you change those guidelines? How is scientific communication moderated? Do you involve experts, for example, or?
We have content raters that constantly sort of teach the algorithms and the machines that filter out the content in the first place. But due to the sheer amount of content that is uploaded every minute, we need the support of machine learning and algorithms to filter out the content that is not supposed to be on the platform, either due to legal requirements or to requirements from our community guidelines.
And could you talk a little bit about the virality of a content? So the more viral a content is, the harder it is to moderate, I guess, and to take down. Or and as Lizzy mentioned, that video went viral, and everything that is negative is deemed to be more viral, and conspiracy theories are deemed to not be very positive.
I don't think that stopping a video from going viral is probably the solution. The solution is probably more in catching the bad actors before they go viral. And of course, the Kurzgesagt video is an example of a video that was intended in a very different way and then got viral for for a reason that wasn't intended. So I think catching or hindering this video from going viral wouldn't be the solution.
Thank you. Lizzy, do you have something to add?
You just said catching the bad actors before they go viral. I guess this is one way. I feel, like as someone who is working or is part of content creation on YouTube, we're just trying to set a good example and like trying to push more people to do the same thing. Be transparent, and tell people or like teach people this is how it should probably look like if you want to take it serious. So if there's this this bit of information that's only a fragment of a bigger context, which they are not telling you, and they are not saying this is very complex, but this is your one answer and solution, and this is definitive the truth. So there's no alleviation whatsoever. You should be very, very suspicious.
So you mentioned that Kurzgesagt was a peacock on the internet once, and could you walk us through the process of when someone says, okay, we want you to do a video, like for Tresca, you did the video that we shot a little bit of a clip that is called "And We Will Do It Again," which was about lying and the necessity of lying when we explain a scientific concept, because none of us here are experts on everything, and no one in the audience is expert on everything. That's impossible. So, what kind of scientific process do you yourself go through?
I mean, when I said that peacock on the internet thing, that was about us not posting as much as we probably should, or as people would expect us to, for a channel with the kind of outreach that we have. So we only do like one video about like once a month or every 6 weeks. So we are already stepping back from that, like pushing things out as fast as possible and as much as possible, but rather focusing on quality and taking the time to check our sources, to do it very thoroughly. We are also always providing the context that I just mentioned, living by our own rules, I guess. And you talked about the process. So, everyone obviously go watch the video. It is explained in more detail there. But we always take the time to involve experts, to have everything that we are putting out there vetted and, double fact checks in-house, but also getting official scientific approval. So, this is something that we always try to make sure, and we never put anything out that we aren't ourselves content with, if it means pushing the deadline or changing things after the fact, late in the process. We always make sure, this has to be possible, otherwise it's not going out there.
Thank you. Jing, I know that you work on TikTok, which...
It's all about being viral, yeah.
Could you tell us a little bit about what kind of accounts are popular on TikTok? Only great people, not spreading conspiracy theories, or?
So a little bit background of this kind of project I'm doing. So since actually quite early on, 2018, and I started to look into how science has been made viral, super popular on a short video platform, TikTok. So in our research, we're interested in questions like what type of content, what kind of content creators could turn science into meme. Other people can recreate it and re-upload. So this kind of mimification of science, that's something I was interested in. So in a paper which we have already published a few years ago, or actually last year, not a few years ago, we found that, unsurprisingly, in its early stage when it comes to science, the most influential actors, we were talking about amateur science communicator, or we can call them incidental science communicators. We're literally talking about teenagers, school kids who are just, making entertaining, fun experiments in their parents' garage, in the bathroom, in the kitchen, or sometimes they just talk to the mirror and record and share very fun science facts. And However, of course, everything's changing. Platforms changing, demographic of platform is changing. And so something we observed recently is that the whole science communication on this platform, TikTok, has also becoming more professionalized and more institutionalized, as we saw in the pandemic. So since early 2020, we have seen high-profile collaboration between the platform with the WHO and also our other higher education institutions to more formally propagate science-related content. And I'm sure Maximilian will say more about similar, initiative about this from YouTube, but that's just the things we were looking at. And so also Kurzgesagt, and they have already have their platform debut on TikTok. So this all exemplify this trend of professionalization, institutionalization of fun science content on this platform. So that brings new opportunities, of course, and also challenges for science communicators to figure out how to work with TikTok. It's not just a short form of YouTube. You can't just cut a YouTube video, make it 15, 60 seconds long, upload on TikTok and hope that it's going to go viral, people are going to love it and share it. So there's a lot of vernacular, platform-specific genre, vocabulary, and the music, everything that needs to be all take into consideration how things can work out, how science can work out on this platform.
Maximilian, do you want to add something?
Yes, I agree. Telling or using short form video, if it's on TikTok or on YouTube, requires very different kinds of storytelling. And when it comes to science communication or science content on YouTube, I would say that we tend to often talk about the 1% of, I called them bad actors earlier, and forget to talk about the 99% of hugely successful and creative channels like Kurzgesagt, who do science communication a big favor with their kind of storytelling and their very entertaining way of telling stories about science. And the past 2 years were tough because of the pandemic, but they also had some good aspects because they, and one example for this is how big a topic science has become on YouTube. And I think the success of Kurzgesagt speaks for that, but we've seen other channels become hugely successful alongside that. The most successful video of the past year on YouTube was from a German science YouTuber, a female science YouTuber, who explained the coronavirus pandemic in a very graspable way. And I think this is the great thing that YouTube can provide when it is compared to traditional media, where such topics often get overlooked.
Agreed. Jing, I'll go back to you. When we prepared this panel, you told me about the people in STEM that are followers of conspiracy theories such as QAnon and 8kun active members, because those people, they have the scientific vocabulary to convince more people, to convince their audience. However, there's a problem in the way they display science and their scientific arguments. Could you elaborate a little bit?
Yeah, sure. So apart from TikTok, another platform, a type of platform I've been doing research on is this so-called French social media. So we're talking about 4chan on actually 8kun, which was previously known as 8chan. So I've been following this QAnon community on this platform for a while, and recently I've been working on studies about how science has been instrumentally utilized by QAnon conspiracy theory supporters to support their conspiratorial theorization of this pandemic. So to my surprise, actually, when I was going through my data, I realized there are lots of medical practitioners, doctors, public health workers, and also people with a STEM science background. They are very active in this special kind of French community online to educate other QAnon followers about this pandemic. And also, they regularly cite scientific publications about pandemic and also about coronavirus in general. They sound very convincing because they use, as Diane mentioned, the fancy technical vocabularies in there to legitimize their conspiracy theorizing about the pandemic. So what it says about science communication, I think there's just kind of rethinking we should have about, maybe our understanding about conspiracy theories is too simple. Those are not people disagree with science, they hate science, they don't believe in science. They actually very creatively, instrumentally utilize science to support their own theorization, their conspiratorial narratives about the pandemic. And yeah, that's something I found very interesting and important that deserve further investigation from the scientific community. So yeah, science can be part of the, I don't know, science can play certain roles in help individuals conspiracy theorizing, pandemic and other related issues.
Thank you. We'll now move on to what kind of practical solutions we can use, or do you, all three, do you use in your jobs and daily lives, or that you would wish to be created, that you could recommend as well to counter scientific conspiracy theories. Lizzy?
I think I already mentioned a couple of the points, and Jason also did a nice job beforehand. But to summarize again, like we talked a lot about transparency. This is also what's in the title of the Tresca project, obviously. So, like making aware, or like making people aware, those statements aren't just like blown or taken out of thin air, but they come from somewhere. This is where they actually come from, to give some context, not only on the topic, but also on the sources. For example, if there's controversy or there's like different statements that you can find on the internet for certain numbers talking about space stuff. For example, like saying there's this range, we picked this number for reason X, Y, Z. I think this is immensely helpful to make people aware there isn't just like one bit of information you can look up for any topic. And another thing is that oversimplification that we talked about earlier, just stating that very clearly. Things are complicated. You have to like narrow the scope a little bit, or simplify in your explanations to give people a segue into the topic, like to basically give them a chance, a stepping stone. But they shouldn't leave with the impression that there's all to know about the topic. And just making those things very obvious, I think, is extremely helpful.
I strongly encourage everyone to see that video on YouTube called And We Will Do It Again from Kurzgesagt. So show your sources, limitations. Jing?
Yeah, I think kind of in this panel, I'm representing the scientific community. I will say something about what can be done, maybe kind of self-reflection from the scientific community itself. Personally, when I was doing my research about conspiracy theory related to COVID-19, I got irritated by one very specific phenomenon or culture from the science community, which is I call it the preprint culture. So in case you're not familiar with it, preprint refers to scientific papers that have not been officially accepted by academic journal or have not been peer reviewed. However, from academia as a system, our system rewards this kind of attention seeking. When a pandemic took place, everyone wants to become the first person, publish something about something, even without peer review. I want to put it somewhere online. I want to spread to the world through social media. And as kind of academic scholarly communication, I think preprints actually got its merit. It kind of accelerated the whole scholarly communication exchange. However, in my own research, I realized a lot of these kinds of preprint research has been picked up by conspiracy theorists to utilize to support their own arguments. So this is kind of example of how this kind of preprint non-peer-reviewed work can be taken out of context to help conspiracy theorists. So what can be done? It's a systematic problem, we still depend on our publication to get a job, but I think there are certain things, maybe reflections can be done by academics, when you are dealing with a topic, you understand the potential of such topic could be maybe used, utilized, or misunderstood by certain group for propagating false information about the topic. I think this kind of awareness of such awareness important, and also it should also be presented on the paper itself to be more specific about the limitation of your finding, to be more specific about the context of application of your research. So yeah, that's just my personal thoughts about academia as a system in general, but not really a solution I can provide there.
That's a bit grim. Maximilian, we know that misinformation and disinformation, the quest to resolve it or to know how to contain it, your platform, your livelihood depends on it. So what do you have in store?
Yes, that's true. And I think we are very much aware of our responsibility towards our users and our growing responsibility in terms of growing and spreading conspiracy theories on the platform. And so how do we tackle this? It's by removing the content that violates the community guidelines or violates the law. We removed in 2019 alone, so before the pandemic even, we removed about 40 million videos off the platform that violated those community guidelines or the law. And by reducing, secondly, by reducing the spread of this borderline content that we talked about that doesn't violate the community guidelines but is in this gray area and content that we don't want to be spread widely, reducing it in the recommendation algorithm, for example. It's by raising authoritative voices. We partnered, for example, with the German health ministry during the time of coronavirus or during the time of lockdown to elevate truthful sources where our users could, or the audience could, really get content from trusted sources and breaking news shelves, for example, that also highlighted news from trusted organizations. And the fourth part is rewarding those creators and organizations that are those trusted sources and helping them to be successful and helping them to be more successful in the future, and in turn creating sort of a good spiral that creates more trusted and good content on the platform.
How do you do that?
Exactly by rewarding the creators for the...
What kind of rewards do they get?
They get a share in hopefully growing advertising revenue on the platform.
That's something we might talk about a little bit later. So we have a few questions from the audience. I'll go to the one asked by Giovanna Paredes. Can you please give a few examples and names of creators you think are doing science communication really well on TikTok and YouTube? Well, Kurzgesagt is the first one. Do you have any other suggestions?
I think it would maybe make sense. You mentioned that most successful video last year. I guess it's My Think, right?
It's My Think.
Yeah.
It's My Lab with a video on the coronavirus, and she's a German creator that has by now taken a step into, funnily enough, taken a step from YouTube into traditional media shows. So she's now having a show on one of the German public service broadcasters. So that speaks for her growing popularity across the country, basically.
Only in German?
It's only in German as far as I know, but we do have subtitles.
She's very good. She's also very nice. And I know one of her researchers, he's a really good guy. So.
Well, we call upon the German Public Service to also translate it in other languages then. Jing, do you have anyone you'd like to recommend?
Yeah, and I don't want to make it sound like I'm forcing everyone to read my paper, but do look at the paper. It's a public, it's open access. It's if you go to Google Scholar and put science memes on TikTok, you should show it. It's not like I don't want to share. Like there are quite a few good examples of TikTokers. They are like mostly amateur content creators, and that kind of, they also give you concrete example. And that kind of paper look at more like the earlier stage, but as I mentioned earlier, the whole institutional employment of TikTok is going to change the whole scenario. We're going to have more professional actors like Kurzgesagt and such account. But if you're interested in more like amateur-based content creators, and I have quite a few examples in the paper.
All right, so everyone go read Jing's paper. I have some examples actually, but they are in French, so I don't know if it's relevant. But we'll go to the Julio Peace question for you, Maximilian. So the person who's behind the screen with the question, if you could go back, thanks, perfect. YouTube earns based on views, and this is very different from its beginning, where good content receives more news. How the new algorithm of YouTube is helping unpopular, spectacular news to go viral. Lots of good content remain unnoticed, if not using sensational titles. So, YouTube, you earn money off the ads that are put in the videos. If a video goes viral, you earn more money. How do you counter that?
Okay, so
how do you balance?
Yeah, first and foremost, I think there's a very popular misunderstanding in that question. It's a very good question, but there's a misunderstanding in that question. YouTube and the creators share the revenue that is earned by the advertising that is seen on YouTube, and it's not the views are the decisive factor, but the watch time a viewer spends on that particular video. So I think it's in YouTube's dear interest to have the viewer have a good experience when watching a video, because he will spend more time with that, and he will, of course, then more likely come back to that certain channel or to spend time on YouTube. So, and I think viral content is not what a viewer is looking for when he or she looks for a good experience. So it's either entertainment or education, in best cases it combines the two, as in Kurzgesagt's case, but it's not sensationalist content that makes users have a good experience. And so I think it's in YouTube's dear interest to really elevate that content that combines entertainment and education in a good way.
So if I can sum it up, or if misinformation and disinformation keep being very present on YouTube, you might have lost revenue, basically.
Also true to a certain because to a certain degree, because many of our advertisers won't be happy to advertise in front of conspiracy theory or other kind of misinformational content. So that will directly hurt the business overall if they. So if we want to keep the platform safe for the brands as well, it will be in our business interest to sort of highlight that content that fulfills their needs as well.
Thank you. From Bogdan Tika, conspiracy theories exist probably because people find psychological comfort in them. In a way, such ideas explain the world to some people in a simple and understandable language for their understanding. As such, where should we draw the line between oversimplification for the sake of understanding? Example, Earth holding hands with the other buddy planets. Oh, I don't know that one. As in Kurzgesagt explanation example for children, yeah. And intuitive ideas, conspiracy theories. For example, Earth is flat because that's what each of us can perceive with our own senses. Yeah, absolutely.
I feel this is a very good question, but I feel the examples that the person is bringing up are on very opposite sides of that range. The Earth holding hands with the buddy planets. I think this is, everyone would intuitively understand that this is an okay way of oversimplification because no one would take it for face value, whereas the Earth is flat. I guess if you if you shower a person with arguments, they could be convinced. I think it's more interesting or relevant to talk about that question when it gets to that gray area. And I think to answer the question, where do you draw the line? I think you can't. There is not one prescriptive answer, but you have to debate it case by case. We also do that for every video, sometimes for every sentence. And I feel it's most important, when you're misrepresenting something that people could mistakenly take as true. For example, behind the scenes story from one of the videos that we are producing at the moment. It's about an amoeba, and we had a very lively discussion with the animation because there's no real life footage of that amoeba, and we made sure that the way that it is moving forward in the video isn't misrepresenting how an amoeba would actually move forward, since people would take that sort of movement as, this is probably realistic, but it is not. I know this is very nitpicky, which probably also tells us, this is how we spend our days. So, when it could be mistaken as true, this is where you should draw the line.
Interesting. Do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I think just something to add rather than just drawing the perfect line here as someone research conspiracy theories. I think part of this issue is for the science community to work on the literacy about how science works. We have to acknowledge the uncertainty nature of most scientific topics. Conspiracy theories are appealing because they provide a very simple answer to very complicated phenomena. So that's comforting, as this member of the audience has mentioned. But the reality is science is a very, when it comes to science research, uncertainty is always there. So how do scientists deliver this kind of uncertainty? It's very tricky. So as Lizzy has mentioned, you have to make this kind of content accessible to the audience, but on the other hand, I think this kind of literacy education to make the public be aware of the uncertainty. And when any kind of topic, you Google Scholar it, you realize the answer will be, we don't know it, depends on the context, That's it's the internal nature of science. So I think it's this balance. It's not just making things easy to digest for the public, and they have to also face the reality. Most of phenomena, it's not that easy to explain, not easy to digest. That's my opinion.
Maximilian, do you want to?
I think it's more for the scientists to talk about that, but I mentioned where we draw the line, real world harm and no real world harm, but I think this is more a question for the scientists.
Another question from Simone Dresen. Dr. Zeng, you mentioned amateur science communication. Can you tell us a bit about credibility or legitimization for these actors on social platforms? Perhaps particularly how audiences respond or discuss this, if you have any insights into that.
I'm very sorry, I don't have my glasses. I actually cannot read the question.
You want me to read it again?
Can you just summarize it for me? What's the question?
So you mentioned earlier science, amateur science communication. Could you talk about credibility and what makes an amateur science communication to a professional one?
Yeah. I love that question because there were certain things I want to mention about when I was talking about science communication, science communicator moved to TikTok. As a researcher, I actually have lots of concern. I worry this kind of a practice would backfire, making something so interesting, entertaining on a topic all of a sudden become boring, and the kids are not interested, the Gen Z, audience are not interested in science anymore. So, the beauty of amateurism, I think researcher Crystal Aberdeen has this famous concept called calibrated amateurism. So that's a concept she proposed when she was talking about online influencers. So for this kind of influencers to reach impacts, they kind of should not avoid presenting themselves too like a professional, and sometimes the system rewards be amateur and being an amateur, so it's more relatable. So science communication, I mentioned that in my paper, it's not just about scientific, informative, it's also about effective. These are like some kind of very important nuance here, depends on the platform. How do you reach certain type of social groups? So, and credibility and amateurism, they are not really against each other in certain contexts, like a playful platform like on TikTok, they actually go hands in hand. Like being the authoritative voice does not necessarily help you to win the viewership, to get more audience, to get more likes. Sometimes people like to see people like themselves to talk about science, to do cute or impressive tricks. So yeah, and for science communicators, there's lots of things to learn from such amateur content creators.
So are a lot of those science communicators have a blue check mark on the social media platforms? Does that help? Does it not help?
Yeah, I think in the whole thing about going viral, mimification, there's a lots of incidental, it's hard to predict. So a lot of examples I studied in my research, they were not influential, verified content creators. They were just ordinary kids and school kids, but incidentally, they become viral, and later on, once they reach like certain number of followership, they get this verified label. But I don't know. The something interesting about TikTok is that, for example, I keep mentioning TikTok as if I'm working for them. Not. I'm just a researcher.
This is the beginning of a conspiracy theory.
The whole thing about TikTok is that the whole verification status being famous does not guarantee success on this platform. There's lots of unpredictability. So yeah, that keeps also things exciting. I never expect, when I'm scrolling down the interface, I have no idea what kind of content I will get exposed to, and then this kind of unpredictable aspect of the thing become challenging, I think, also for science communicators. Yeah.
Interesting. I think you have a blue check mark. I think since then, or I don't know, maybe you always had one? Probably not.
No. I think we had to get it, but I wasn't involved in that.
Okay. All right, let's move on. I have two questions. Actually, well, for the three of you, should non-institutional scientific content be prevented to become viral, or should this content come with a note, a warning? This is not an established professional content creator. Maximilian?
From my point of view, definitely no, because I think it's the perfect add-on to the last question from the audience. From YouTube's point of view, definitely no, because YouTube embraces the amateur, embraces everyone as a science creator. From a company like Kurzgesagt that has these incredible means of production and puts a lot of effort into production, or someone who distributes out of their garage or backyard. And I think everybody is a legitimate science creator for YouTube in the first place, as long as they stick to the aforementioned community guidelines and sort of stick to the general rules on the platform everybody is legit, if you...
But then, if I understood correctly, those guidelines, you don't involve experts, you don't involve scientists, you don't involve people like Jing, for example, in the making of those guidelines.
There is a sort of changing group of external people involved in the creation of these guidelines, and they are changing, as I mentioned, very rapidly, and we are being very transparent about how these community guidelines are formed and what they sort of entail. So they are open to the public.
Lizzy, Jing, would you like to see the non-institutional content to be prevented to?
I mean, I guess we are also non-institutional content, so. But I think it also depends on like what people are like what you as a viewer are trying to get from that sort of content, and also what those people are trying to achieve. When it comes to like, I don't know, deciding whether to get a vaccine or not, I would say like please talk to your GP. If it is about like, I don't know, getting interested in something, you know, like sparking, you know, like what we're trying to do is like sparking curiosity, and I think this is everyone can do. And I think what Jing just said earlier, I think the most important factor or why that works so well is authenticity. You know, like those people are authentically enthusiastic about what they just learned themselves or what they are experiencing, and that just transfers to the audience. And I think this is something that's immeasurably good for science. So no, it should not be abolished.
I think my answer would be short. On the contrary, I would actually encourage institutions to take this kind of amateur content creators on board, to collaborate with them, to learn from them. I think that's going to be a win-win for both parties. They kind of legitimize, you know, the voice of these amateur creators, even just, you know, school kids and teenagers. On the other side, you also kind of get more down to earth and more authentic by working with these kind of individual amateur content creators. So I would be looking forward to see more of this kind of collaboration between amateur content creators and institutions who try to be more visible, more, you know, closer to the Gen Z audience. Yeah.
Which is kind of what we did here at Tresca when we brought in Kurzgesagt. I have one last question because we only have a few minutes left, which could be an opening to the next panel, the next time the four of us are in Brussels, I don't know. Research showed people who feel alone, recently separated, divorced, relocated, going through any hardship, mental health issues as well, tend to believe in conspiracy theories. Do any of you work or intend to work or research with mental health professionals to resolve those issues, to prevent people to believe into conspiracy theories? Or not at all, and I just give you the idea of the century.
Oh no, you know, like now I'm starting a conspiracy theory about like a video that Kurzgesagt is probably going to do, which is sort of a running gag. We keep promising those type of things and then it never happens, so don't.
I'll get some of that money from the ads, right?
That's totally how it works and exactly what we said here today. So we're not currently working on anything like that. You know, like we did a video about loneliness quite some time ago and also about mental health implications, but never in that context, which is actually like an interesting correlation. You know, like less loneliness would be good for a number of reasons. I wasn't necessarily aware that this is one of them. I'll take that home to the research team and we will like sit on it.
Maximilian,
we are very aware that this is a growing topic on the platform, and we see more and more creators getting involved with it, and I think that is good and it helps a lot of people. But I think, as Lizzy said, if you have such problems, you better go see a doctor, and in that case, that is especially true.
If you can, if you have the money,
if you can, you're right.
There are doctors around you. It's
true. But I think we as a platform, of course, would be the forum for this kind of content and continue to be the forum, but we, as usual, don't get involved in content production ourselves and be a platform to distribute the content.
Absolutely. For you, my question was more like, does YouTube talk with mental health professionals to establish those guidelines, for example?
You know what we did in the past years, as this has increasingly become a topic for our users as well, we established some tools to help our users deal with their own well-being, like put an end to notifications that the users receive when new videos are uploaded by their favorite channels, for example, or setting timers to limit their consumption to certain times of the day, for example. So this has been really integrated into the platform because we have seen the need from our users to sort of have a better look after their well-being.
Jing, do you research with any mental health professionals?
No, but I do want to make a comment on this, what you mentioned as a loneliness. But rather than the loneliness on the individual level, I do want to say something about, conspiracy theory, loneliness more like on a higher level. Those groups are very isolated, marginalized groups. And I think just as, my last remark on this, as science communicators or as journalists, or also as a scientific researcher myself, we should be very careful about using the label of conspiracy theorists or even conspiracy theories, because in certain contexts, misuses, abuse of such labels comes with the risk of further polarizing the society and marginalizing certain groups. Not everyone sharing related to conspiracy theory content, they are conspiracy theories. They have their doubts, sometimes the content resonates with their internal fear, uncertainty, that kind of thing. So I think this kind of consideration is also very important. We should avoid further, pushing these social groups away from, so it's a loneliness on the societal level. So that's something we should also take into consideration.
Thank you, Jing. Let's use our empathy and try to stop the polarization as much as we can. This brings the panel to a close. Lizzy, Maximilian, and Jing, thank you so much for joining us. Jason, I think the screen is yours again.
Yes, thank you, Diane, and a very fascinating and really interesting panel with a lot of different issues that I think really do present a number of challenges for us. Some of these, of course, we can start to think about and address from a policy perspective and a bit more broadly, and that's actually our next segment. But before we go to that, we'll take a short break. We'll return at 16:30, just a few minutes from now. Thank you.